What if I told you that somewhere behind closed doors, a conversation about you has already taken place? A discussion you were never intended to hear, an exchange that may uncover more about your connection than months of face-to-face communication ever could. Most people believe that the greatest moments in life unfold directly before them. But the truth is, the events that alter our destiny often begin in secret, within quiet rooms, unspoken thoughts, and personal reflections. Right now, there may be someone who cannot get you out of their mind. Someone who has arrived at a point where your presence has become impossible to set aside. Your name, your energy, and the impression you've left on their life may have become the focus of serious thought. Questions have been raised. Feelings have been looked at honestly. Truths that were once buried may have finally come to the surface. But here is the unexpected part. What was said may not be what you would anticipate. The conversation may have brought to light fears, hopes, emotions, and realizations that even they were not entirely aware of before. Sometimes the most powerful discoveries are not about another person. They are about ourselves and how profoundly someone has touched us. So stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear may completely reshape the way you understand this connection and the unseen forces at work behind it. There are moments in life when something significant takes place far from our sight, beyond our awareness. And yet its effects begin moving toward us long before we understand what has happened. Human beings often assume that only visible actions shape their destiny. But many of the events that shape our lives begin in private conversations, quiet reflections, and concealed decisions. The idea that your soulmate held a private discussion about you points to one of these unseen moments. It suggests that somewhere in a space you could not enter, in a conversation you were not meant to hear, your name became significant enough to be brought up. What makes this possibility so compelling is not the meeting itself, but what it represents on a deeper level. People do not gather their thoughts around someone unless that person has begun holding a meaningful place within their inner world. When an individual continuously appears in another person's mind, they become more than a fleeting thought. They become a symbol, a question, or even a possible answer to something far deeper. This is how meaningful connections so often begin. Long before words are exchanged openly, an invisible process unfolds beneath the surface. A private meeting about you may not always mean a formal gathering. Sometimes it exists as a conversation between close friends, family members, or people whose perspectives carry weight. At other times, it is a meeting that takes place entirely within the mind itself. One part of a person weighs logic, while another part speaks through emotion. One voice urges caution while another pushes forward. Human beings are rarely as straightforward as they appear. Inside every individual exists a dialogue between competing desires, fears, hopes, and expectations. When someone feels deeply about another person, these inner voices grow increasingly active. What is remarkable is that such discussions tend to arise when a person can no longer overlook the impact someone has made on their life. Your presence may have stirred questions that demand answers. Why does this person keep returning to my mind? Why do I feel differently when I think about them? Why does their absence feel so noticeable? These questions do not come from ordinary encounters. They surface when a connection begins touching something far deeper than everyday interaction. Many people assume that attraction is purely emotional. Yet deeper connections awaken something far more profound. They challenge long-held beliefs, uncover hidden desires, and expose fears that have stayed buried for years. When this occurs, a person naturally seeks clarity. They look for perspective, guidance, and understanding. This is often why private conversations happen. The individual is trying to make sense of an experience that feels too large for logic alone to explain. In many cases, the discussion centers not on who you are on the outside, but on what you represent. Every meaningful relationship acts as a mirror. Through another person, we begin noticing aspects of ourselves that were previously invisible. Your soulmate may be uncovering qualities within themselves, simply because of their thoughts about you. They may be rediscovering strengths they had forgotten, vulnerabilities they had tried to conceal, or dreams they had set aside long ago. The conversation becomes less about gathering information and more about understanding transformation. The most surprising element of a private meeting is often its honesty. Public conversations are frequently shaped by image and social expectation. Private discussions, however, tend to surface what people genuinely think and feel. Behind closed doors, masks become less necessary. The truths that emerge in these moments are often the ones that carry the greatest weight. A person may finally acknowledge feelings they have been denying, concerns they have kept hidden, or hopes they have been too afraid to voice. What makes such a moment significant is that it represents a turning point. Something that once existed only as a vague impression begins taking shape. Uncertainty starts giving way to awareness. Thoughts become sharper. Emotions become harder to dismiss, whether the person fully realizes it or not. The very act of discussing you signals that your presence has moved beyond the ordinary and entered a space of deeper meaning within their inner world. There comes a point in every meaningful connection when presence becomes stronger than distance, stronger than silence, and sometimes even stronger than open communication. This is the moment when your energy becomes impossible to overlook. It is not about physical appearance, ongoing conversations, or bold gestures. It is about the invisible influence one person begins to have on another's inner world. Long before major developments unfold, there is often a quiet shift in awareness. A person begins noticing that someone keeps appearing in their thoughts, returning to their mind unexpectedly, and leaving an impression that simply will not fade. Human beings are deeply shaped by energy, even if they rarely put it in those terms. Every interaction carries more than words. It carries emotions, intentions, attitudes, and psychological impressions. Most encounters leave only temporary marks. They appear briefly and vanish just as quickly. Yet certain individuals produce a different effect. Their presence lingers. Their memory stays active. Their influence continues working beneath conscious awareness long after the interaction has ended. This is when energy begins becoming impossible to overlook. What makes this phenomenon so powerful is that it often unfolds without deliberate effort. The strongest impressions are rarely manufactured. They arise naturally when someone expresses a genuine version of themselves. Authenticity creates a unique psychological effect because it stands apart in a world where many people are concealing themselves behind expectations, social roles, and carefully shaped identities. When someone encounters real confidence, sincerity, depth, or emotional honesty, they feel something that is hard to describe but impossible to dismiss. Your soulmate may find themselves thinking of you during unexpected moments. Perhaps they are absorbed in daily responsibilities, focused on work, family, or personal goals, and suddenly your image enters their mind without invitation. They may hear a phrase that brings you to mind, visit a place that stirs a memory, or experience an emotion that somehow traces back to your presence. These moments may seem random on the surface, but psychologically they reveal something important. The mind naturally returns to what it regards as meaningful. People tend to believe they have full command over every thought they have. Yet much of the mind operates below conscious awareness. Deep impressions keep shaping behavior, even when attention is directed elsewhere. This is why meaningful connections can feel so persistent. The individual may try to concentrate on practical matters, but a part of their attention keeps returning to the person who has captured their interest, not because they consciously choose it every time, but because something within them recognizes significance. Another reason your energy becomes so difficult to ignore is that it may awaken qualities they have not encountered in a long time. Certain people remind us of forgotten parts of ourselves. One person may reawaken hope. Another may inspire courage. Someone else may encourage emotional openness. These experiences build powerful psychological associations. Instead of simply remembering the individual, The person begins remembering how they feel when that individual is present. The emotional impact becomes woven into the memory. This process can be disorienting because it defies ordinary explanations. A person may question why thoughts of you continue arising. They may try to examine the situation logically, searching for clear reasons behind their expanding awareness. Yet some experiences resist simple analysis. The heart and mind do not always follow predictable patterns. Sometimes a connection deepens quietly, gathering strength beneath the surface before becoming fully visible. As your influence grows, those around them may begin noticing subtle changes as well. Their mood may shift when your name comes up. Their attention may sharpen when conversations turn to topics related to you. They may seem distracted, reflective, or unusually engaged whenever thoughts about you arise. Even when they attempt to stay neutral, the energy of a meaningful connection often finds ways of expressing itself indirectly. The deeper reason your energy becomes impossible to ignore is that it is no longer functioning as something external. It has become part of their internal reality. Your presence exists not only in memories, but in expectations, reflections, hopes, and thoughts about the future. The mind devotes attention to what it believes matters. And when someone keeps returning to the same person in thought, emotion, and imagination, it reveals that the connection has moved beyond casual interest and settled into a place of genuine psychological importance. Questions about the future rarely arise without a reason. They surface when something in the present begins feeling significant enough to warrant deeper consideration. When your soulmate starts asking questions about where things are headed, it suggests that your connection has moved beyond a passing curiosity and entered a space where real possibilities are being explored. Human beings do not naturally pour mental and emotional energy into imagining future outcomes unless they believe something or someone has the potential to play an important role in their lives. The future exists as a psychological landscape filled with uncertainty. No one can see it clearly, yet everyone works to form a picture of what may come. These imagined futures are shaped by hopes, fears, desires, and personal experiences. When another person begins inhabiting that landscape, it reveals a shift in perception. Rather than seeing life as a path walked alone, the mind starts entertaining the idea of shared experiences, shared goals, and shared emotional journeys. Your soulmate may find themselves wondering where this connection is heading, even if they cannot yet explain why. At first, these questions may surface subtly. They might think about how different situations would feel with you present. They may imagine future conversations, future chances to connect, or future moments that have not yet arrived. These thoughts often come quietly without announcement, but they carry real significance because they indicate that your presence has become woven into their vision of what lies ahead. One of the reasons forward-looking thinking grows so powerful is that it forces a person to examine what they truly value. In everyday life, many decisions are made automatically. People follow routines, obligations, and familiar patterns. However, when they begin picturing a future that'll involve another person, deeper priorities come into focus. Questions arise about compatibility, emotional fulfillment, trust, growth, and lasting happiness. The individual begins examining not only the connection itself, but also the kind of life they wish to build. This process often triggers reflection on the past as well. Human beings naturally compare potential futures with previous experiences. If someone has known disappointment, heartbreak, or unmet expectations before, they may approach new possibilities with care. At the same time, meaningful connections have a way of challenging old conclusions. A person who once believed certain dreams were out of reach may begin seeing them differently. Someone who had built emotional walls may start imagining what genuine openness could feel like again. The questions that emerge are not always simple. They often carry uncertainty and contradiction. One part of the mind may feel energized by possibility, while another part remains watchful. One voice encourages stepping forward, while another seeks reassurance. This inner dialogue is a natural part of any meaningful connection because the future always holds risk. To care about someone is to acknowledge that their presence matters, and once someone matters, the outcome carries emotional weight. As thoughts about the future continue developing, the connection begins quietly shaping decisions. Priorities may shift. Certain opportunities may feel more valuable than they once did. The individual may grow more attuned to their own emotional needs, personal aspirations, and long-term desires. Rather than focusing only on immediate circumstances, they begin considering broader questions about direction, purpose, and companionship. What makes these forward-looking reflections especially meaningful is what they reveal about investment. The mind tends to devote energy to what it considers truly worthwhile. When someone repeatedly returns to thoughts about where a connection may lead, they are granting that connection a place within their psychological future. They are no longer viewing it as something confined to the present moment. Instead, it becomes part of an unfolding story whose next chapters remain unwritten, yet are already significant enough to hold their attention, emotion, and imagination. Unexpected truths often emerge when emotions grow too strong to stay hidden. For a long time, people can avoid certain realities about themselves, their feelings, or the impact another person has had on their lives. They distract themselves with responsibilities, rational explanations, and the routines of everyday life. Yet beneath the surface, the unconscious mind keeps gathering evidence. Feelings grow quietly. Observations build and insights take shape in places beyond immediate awareness. Eventually, a moment arrives when what was concealed can no longer stay buried. This is when unexpected truths begin coming to light. In the context of your soulmate's private meeting, these revelations are not necessarily dramatic admissions spoken aloud for all to hear. More often, they appear as realizations that catch even the person experiencing them off guard. A thought that was once uncertain suddenly becomes clear. A feeling that seemed fleeting reveals itself to be lasting. An emotional bond that was previously underestimated begins showing its true depth. The surprise comes not because the truth was absent before, but because it went unrecognized. Human beings are remarkably skilled at hiding things from themselves. People often believe they fully understand their own emotions, yet much of their inner world functions outside conscious awareness. Feelings can exist long before they are completely acknowledged. A person may convince themselves that someone is only a passing interest, only to discover later that the connection has taken up a much larger space within their heart. They may tell themselves they are unaffected, while their thoughts keep returning to the same individual. These contradictions reveal the gap that can exist between what people think they feel and what they actually feel. During private discussions, whether with trusted people or through honest personal reflection, these hidden realities often rise to the surface. Questions that had been avoided are finally faced. Emotions that had been minimized are examined with honesty. The individual begins looking beyond appearances and asks themselves the difficult but necessary questions. Why does this person keep occupying my thoughts? Why do their words stay with me? Why do I feel a sense of significance whenever I think about them? Such questions have the power to bring to light truths that were previously buried beneath distraction or self-denial. One of the most surprising discoveries may involve recognizing the emotional influence another person has quietly created. Many individuals underestimate how deeply they have been affected until they stop and truly reflect. They suddenly realize that their mood shifts when they think of someone. Certain memories carry an unusual emotional charge. Future possibilities begin including that person's presence, almost without effort. What once seemed minor reveals itself to be deeply meaningful. Unexpected truths also surface when people recognize qualities they admire but had not consciously identified. Sometimes a person is drawn toward another because they embody characteristics that connect deeply with their own psychological needs. Strength, kindness, authenticity, wisdom, confidence, or emotional depth may leave a powerful impression. Yet these qualities are not always named immediately. Only through reflection does the person come to understand why this connection feels unlike others they have known. Another revelation may involve fear. While people often concentrate on attraction and warmth, meaningful connections frequently expose vulnerability as well. A person may realize they fear losing an opportunity before it has a chance to fully develop. They may uncover concerns about rejection, uncertainty, or emotional exposure. These fears themselves become evidence of how much the connection means, because people rarely fear losing what holds no value for them. The presence of anxiety often signals the presence of genuine emotional investment. As these truths come into focus, old assumptions begin to fall away. Narratives that once felt convincing lose their hold. The individual grows more honest with themselves about what they feel, what they hope for, and what they can no longer dismiss. The process is often transformative because it trades confusion for clarity. Hidden emotions gain recognition. Unspoken realities gain definition. What was once buried beneath the surface rises into awareness, bringing with it a deeper understanding of the connection and the role it has come to occupy within their inner world. Human beings rarely exist in complete isolation. Even when personal feelings are kept private, the effects of those feelings often become visible to those nearby. This is why others sometimes notice changes before the individual has fully made sense of them. When people close to your soulmate begin noticing your impact, it suggests that the connection has grown strong enough to influence behavior, emotions, and patterns of thought in ways that can be observed from the outside. What may have started as an entirely internal experience gradually leaves traces in the external world. Every meaningful connection creates a psychological ripple effect. Thoughts influence emotions, emotions influence behavior, and behavior shapes the way a person engages with others. Family members, close friends, and trusted companions often become attuned to these shifts because they are familiar with the person's usual habits and attitudes. They pick up on subtle differences that a stranger might miss. A slight change in mood, a fresh sense of excitement, moments of distraction, or an unusual depth of reflection can all signal that something important is taking place beneath the surface. Your soulmate may not openly share every feeling they carry, but emotions have a way of making themselves known indirectly. A person's energy changes when they become emotionally invested in someone. They may smile without warning when a certain topic arises. They may seem more thoughtful than usual. Their attention may drift toward memories, possibilities, or conversations connected to the person who occupies their mind. Those around them often pick up on these small shifts and begin forming their own sense of what may be happening. One reason others detect your influence is that meaningful connections tend to reshape perspective. When someone encounters a person who genuinely matters to them, they often begin viewing life through a different lens. Their priorities may shift. Certain goals may feel more important. Some worries may loosen their grip while new hopes emerge. These inner changes naturally affect the way they speak, make decisions, and move through the world. Friends and family who witness these developments may sense that a new presence has entered the person's life. People are especially perceptive when emotional patterns shift. If someone who is typically reserved becomes more expressive, those around them take notice. If someone who often seems indifferent suddenly shows enthusiasm, curiosity, or emotional depth, questions arise. Human beings instinctively look for explanations behind meaningful behavioral changes. As a result, those closest to your soulmate may become aware that someone has captured their attention long before any open acknowledgement occurs. Another important dimension of this process is that meaningful connections often fuel personal growth. When an individual feels genuinely inspired by another person, they may begin developing qualities that had been lying dormant. They might grow more confident, more open, more optimistic, or more willing to face personal challenges head-on. These positive transformations rarely go unnoticed. The people around them observe the shift and naturally find themselves wondering who or what has played a role in bringing it about. In many cases, others recognize emotional importance through repeated patterns. They notice how often your name surfaces in conversation, how regularly certain topics return, or how much interest is shown whenever something related to you is mentioned. Even attempts to stay neutral can unintentionally betray significance. The more a person tries to downplay or conceal an important connection, the more noticeable certain reactions can become to those paying attention. What makes this dynamic particularly meaningful is that outside observers are often less clouded by personal uncertainty. While your soulmate may still be sorting through their feelings, friends and family can sometimes view the situation with greater clarity. They observe consistent behaviors, recurring emotional responses, and quiet transformations that point toward a deeper truth. Through their observations, it becomes increasingly clear that your presence has extended beyond a brief impression and has begun shaping thoughts, emotions, and attitudes in ways that are visible not only to the individual themselves, but to the people who know them most intimately. Every meaningful connection eventually reaches a point where reflection alone is no longer sufficient. Thoughts can circle endlessly, emotions can deepen in silence, and questions can go unanswered for a long time. But sooner or later, something begins pressing toward a decision. This movement is often imperceptible at first. It does not arrive with dramatic announcements or sudden declarations. Instead, it takes shape gradually within the depths of the mind, where possibilities are weighed, emotions are examined, and future outcomes are considered. When a decision is quietly beginning to form, it means the connection has entered a new psychological stage. Human beings naturally reach for certainty. The mind is not comfortable remaining in a state of endless ambiguity. While uncertainty can be endured for a time, it eventually creates inner tension. A person begins feeling the need to understand where they stand, what they truly feel, and what direction they want to take. This internal pressure intensifies when emotions are involved because meaningful connections demand attention. They refuse to stay unresolved indefinitely. As a result, the individual gradually moves from observation toward choice. Your soulmate may have spent considerable time examining the connection from different angles. They may have questioned their emotions, assessed their experiences, and held their feelings up against past relationships or personal expectations. Such reflection is not a sign of confusion or weakness. It is often a sign that the connection matters enough to be treated with care. The deeper the significance, the more thoughtfully people tend to approach the decisions before them. A quietly forming decision often begins with small realizations, rather than sweeping conclusions. The individual begins noticing patterns that can no longer be set aside. They recognize how consistently thoughts of you return. They become aware of the emotional imprint your presence has left. They acknowledge that certain feelings have remained steady over time, rather than dissolving. These observations accumulate like pieces of a puzzle. Each realization adds to a growing sense of clarity. One of the most important dimensions of decision-making is the relationship between emotion and reason. Many people imagine these forces to be working against each other. Yet meaningful decisions often emerge when both begin moving in the same direction. Emotion supplies motivation and significance, while reason evaluates practicality and long-term consequences. When someone is considering an important connection, both elements become engaged. The heart asks what feels meaningful, while the mind asks what is possible. A decision begins forming when these two voices start finding common ground. During this process, the individual may also confront fears that have stayed concealed until now. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of change, and fear of the unknown can all shape the path toward a decision. Meaningful relationships often call for courage because they involve emotional exposure. To care deeply about someone means accepting the possibility of disappointment. Yet it also means accepting the possibility of growth, connection, and fulfillment. The person must decide which possibility deserves the greater weight. As clarity builds, attention shifts naturally from what has already occurred to what should happen next. The focus moves away from endless examination and toward future action. Questions grow more specific. Possibilities become more defined. Rather than simply wondering about the connection, the individual begins considering how they wish to respond to it. Their thoughts become less scattered and more purposeful. What makes a quietly forming decision so powerful is that it often transforms the entire meaning of a connection. Feelings that once existed only as private experiences begin moving toward intentional direction. Reflection evolves into commitment. Curiosity deepens into understanding. Uncertainty gradually yields to purpose. Beneath the surface, where no one else can fully see, the mind and heart continue working together, shaping a choice that grows stronger with every realization, every reflection, and every acknowledgement of the significance the connection has come to hold within their inner world. As we arrive at the end of this journey, one truth becomes unmistakable. The most important events in our lives often begin long before they become visible. A private meeting, concealed thoughts, unexpected realizations, growing awareness, outside observations, and a quietly forming decision all point toward the same reality. Something meaningful is unfolding beneath the surface. Whether these events are happening exactly as described or symbolically reflecting a deeper emotional process, they remind us that genuine connections have the power to reshape people from within. The greatest relationships are not built on force, desperation, or relentless pursuit. They arise when two individuals are growing, learning, and becoming more deeply aware of themselves. Sometimes the answers we seek are not found in grasping for certainty, but in trusting the process of life and allowing what is meant for us to reveal itself in its own time. Every meaningful connection carries lessons, growth, and opportunities for self-discovery. The more clearly we understand ourselves, the more readily we recognize the people who truly belong in our journey. Thank you for spending this time with me and for joining in this exploration of the hidden forces that shape human relationships. Your attention, presence, and willingness to engage with these ideas are genuinely appreciated. If this message resonated with you, carry its insights forward and reflect on how they may connect to your own path. I wish you clarity where there is confusion, confidence where there is doubt, and peace where there is uncertainty. May the connections that are meant for you find their way into your life at exactly the right moment. And may you continue growing into the person you are destined to become. Good luck on your journey. Take care of yourself, and remember that some of the most meaningful chapters of life are still waiting to be written. Thank you, and until next time, stay strong, stay hopeful, and keep moving forward.